Hello, now that our panel's here, my name is Ayali Hunt. I am a campaigns director at Fight for the Future, and I work primarily on surveillance and data privacy issues, and focus on the intersection of surveillance and policing, as well as workplace surveillance. So before we start our conversation today, I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start off with Mona.
Hi everyone, my name is Mona, she, her. I'm with United for Respect. My background is climate organizing, but now I'm in labor and I work closely with Amazon workers. And Stray, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, I'm Freya, and I work alongside Mona at United for Respect. We are organizing Amazon workers, and I am also a former Amazon worker for 3 years. Handing it over to Allegra.
Hello, I'm Allegra. I've been working with United for Respect for almost over a year now, almost 2 years, I believe. And I currently work for Amazon. I've been working there for 4 years now.
Okay, thank you everyone, and just to let folks know, Allegra's having a little bit of a tech issue, but she can hear everything, so she'll be actively participating in the conversation. But just in case you're trying to figure out what's going on with the camera, I just wanted to highlight that. So, today we're going to be primarily focusing this conversation on workplace surveillance and, what is happening now. Surveillance in the workplace has always been an issue, but in a lot of ways, the onset of COVID has dramatically increased and exploded since then. And whether it's people being surveilled who are working from home, or greater surveillance used in the actual physical workplace to account for less people being on staff. Surveillance became the kind of go-to solution for a lot of the private sector. The folks on this call, a lot of folks who work on this issue, first, Amazon is their principal kind of bad actor when it comes to workplace surveillance, mainly because they're at the cutting edge and one of the top innovators for creating different types of workplace surveillance, as well as how that workplace surveillance interacts. And they're also the second largest employer in the country. And so, there has been a lot of stories in the news, everything from Amazon and how they surveil workers using social media, to having their own private intelligence kind of like team that are made up of ex-intelligence agents from the U.S. military, to the surveillance cameras in Amazon delivery vans that are surveilling cameras in communities. But with that, today I just want to say we're going to focus specifically on race and workplace surveillance happening in Amazon warehouses. And so that's going to be the lens through which we're looking at this issue. So, I think to start off the conversation and ground us, Allegra, can you kind of speak to Amazon surveillance and principally the productivity surveillance they use, rate TOT, and kind of explain to people what it is and kind of like what it's like to work within Amazon warehouses?
Yeah, so rate and TOT, rate is likely they're tracking how well you're performing every day. Throughout the day, you have a rate all day long. And that has to do with, how many units you're picking in an hour. And then, how you're moving how fast you're moving. And then TOT is time off task. And so basically they're tracking you when you're working all day long. They're what you call it. Yeah, so the way it works is like your breaks, you get a 20-minute. Well, 20-minute is actually, the first break is actually only it was originally a 15-minute, but they extended it to 20 minutes. But now they're actually going back to 15-minute breaks. They started that this Tuesday that just passed. And so basically with TOT, with that is like the break time. They expect you, say my first break is at 8 o'clock. So it's now 8 to 8:15. So they expect you to get your last pick in before break at 8 o'clock, even though that's the start of your break. And they expect you to get your first pick in after break at 8:15, even though that's when your break is just ending. So yeah, and then when you're not scanning, you're accumulating TOT. If you come back from break, even if it's like a minute late, your TOT starts accumulating. And if you have 30 minutes, it's like a verbal coaching, like a documented coaching. It's the first written, but yeah, a first written, and then an hour is a is like is a final, and then 2 hours is termination, and then you're automatically terminated. So that's how TOT works.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you, Allegra. And I think one of the things about like rate TOT, as we understand it, is essentially it's telling you where to go and it's giving you seconds. Like it's managing and monitoring your day in a second to second increment. Is that what you're experiencing?
Yeah.
And what is it like? What is the impact on you and other workers, and with that kind of level of deep monitoring?
But a lot of people, it's draining, exhausting. You're dealing with it every day, you know, all day long, especially if you work in certain areas. Like I know, like I work where you close packages, and so they don't really get on customers. I mean, not customers, workers, pickers. Because I pick and do what's called slam. Slam is where you close the packages, and they don't get on pickers about how they, pack up the orders in the bag. So in my work area, slam, where you close them after they're done picking the order, if the bag is messed up, you have to fix it. And I'm not talking a little milk out of, I'm talking someone just threw all the items in it. It's like a messy mountain, literally items just stacked up, falling out of the bag. You literally have to go through and fix every single bag. You have one cart where you get 10 boxes on it, and then another cart where you get 16 small bags on one cart. So imagine you having to go through and fix 16 small bags on on an entire cart, every cart, multiple carts all day long. And they still now they want rate over there to be a minimum of a 140. And they're threatening, oh well, if it's not a minimum 140, then we're gonna write you up. You get a documented coaching it, and then eventually they're gonna write you up. So it's like you have no wins. And you try and talk to them, hey, well, this is going on, this isn't right. Not to mention, you don't even have working equipment really. You have like tape machines we use to close the bags and stuff. They're like several years old. And when I'm saying so, I don't mean like 2 or 3. Okay, I've been there for 4 years. And the tape machines were probably already a few years old when I got there. And we need new equipment, scanners and stuff don't work. So all of that plays a role in, your TOT. Because if you don't got a working scanner, I'm telling you, the problem you're having with your scanner is it's having problems connecting to Wi-Fi in the building. And so if you're having problems with the scanner, that's slowing you down. You have to stop. You're in the middle of picking, you have to stop, go try and find a scanner. There's so many pickers and so many workers that they don't even have enough scanners. There are times when my scanner don't work and I have to find a whole new one, and I'm running around for 15 minutes trying to find a scanner because there's no scanners. And all that time spent running around, I'm accumulating TOT. That's TOT.
Yeah. So basically, in just trying to execute your job, with the lack of equipment and the way things are set up, you're, accumulating a TOT that could lead to you being disciplined, and after a certain amount of accumulation could lead to you being fired.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're going to be focusing on is in this conversation is just how this kind of surveillance disproportionately impacts Black and brown workers, who are more likely to hold these jobs, and also, a lot of the forms of the surveillance used, whether it's facial recognition or algorithmic discrimination, also just tend to, disproportionately negatively impact Black and brown workers. Is there anything you want to speak to that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Yeah, just basically talking about this conversation and how, we're really going to talk about not just the impacts of rate TOT, but how those impacts disproportionately impact Black and brown workers. I just wanted to see if there's anything you wanted to say to speak to the experience of Black workers specifically in this environment and how they're being impacted.
Yeah, we're being taken advantage of, not being treated fairly. Like the building I work at, up until recently, like operation managers, I've been there 4 years. We finally probably just got like a Black operations manager. And like you look at higher ups, the people who sit in the office, there's no brown skinned people. There's no diversity. And when I first started, I had reported them because there was a lot of unfairness going on at my site. And I peeped it like my first few days working there. And I reported them. And then after I reported them, HR called me in the office and they basically were like, how dare I contact corporate and get them in trouble? And they're like, oh, you just come to us. Why are you contacting corporate? You can't contact corporate if you have a problem. That's literally what they told me. And I told them how many times I came to y'all and I told y'all I've been complaining. And I'm not the only one. They said I'm not allowed to contact corporate because when people report them, they get in trouble because then, they start looking like the corporate started looking at, okay, like what's going on here? And yeah, because I had got on that. I was like, where's the diversity? Why do you guys not have any diversity with managers? Why is it this one shift or all over the bin? There's only probably like 2 people of color who are managers. And then there's no diversity. And you know what they told me? Oh, well, that's all who applies. And I told them how big of a company Amazon is. Ain't no way no people of color don't apply. Ain't no way. People of all shades, skin, whatever you want to call, everybody apply, but they're giving the positions to people who they want to have, people their own skin color.
Yeah, thank you, Allegra, for that. And we know that there's like a long history of just in our country of using surveillance to control Black and brown bodies and surveillance and working, Black and brown workers specifically. Mona, could you speak to that a little bit more about this history and what's been happening with surveillance and Black and brown workers?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people think of surveillance as something that has only come into being over the past few years with the rise of technology. And while the rise of technology and big tech has definitely shaped what surveillance looks like today, surveilling workers is not a new phenomenon. It is not only limited to just cameras in workplaces. Corporate profiting from innovating brutal systems of control and monitoring have a long history in the U.S., going back to the plantation and early factories. Worker surveillance can be traced back to the 1790s on the plantations when enslaved people picked cotton. And of course, there's a term used in Amazon facilities called picking, meaning where they pick the products off of the conveyor belt. And how no one has flagged that. I'm not sure why, but it's Amazon, so it's clearly problematic. But anyway, on the 19th century cotton frontier, enslavers extracted more production from each enslaved person every year. And this wasn't because of a machine like the ones that were crucial to textile production, but rather through brutal exploitation. Once the cotton gin was invented, enslavers could clean as much cotton for market as they could grow and harvest. So enslavers then wanted to make sure they could produce as much cotton as the gin could clean, therefore wanting to increase productivity. This is when the pushing system, as enslaved people called it, came into being. This was a system that extracted more work by using oppressively direct supervision combined with torture. If enslaved people lagged, resisted, or deviated from the task at hand, they were severely tortured and punished. Innovation in violence and punitive labor practices like this was the foundation of the pushing system, and this brutal exploitation is foundational to U.S. history. Also established in 1790 was the disciplinary concept of, I always mess up pronunciation, panopticonism, which is a systemic ordering and controlling of the human populations through subtle and often unseen forces. An example of this is a central observation tower placed within a circle of prison cells. And from the tower, the guard can see every cell and inmate, but the inmates can't see into the tower, so prisoners often never know whether or not they're being watched. This concept is still used today, obviously, to control prisoners, poor people, communities of color, etc. Fast forward to 1855, when the Pinkerton National Detective Agency was established to spy on worker organizations. Worker organizers infiltrate unions and intimidate workers as a means to control and neutralize worker organizing. And then in 1880, scientific management, or Taylorism as it's also known, as it was pioneered by Frederick Winslow Taylor, was developed. This theory of management, in Taylor's words, proposed a neat, understandable world in the factory, an organization of men whose acts would be planned, coordinated, and controlled under continuous direction. In other words, this form of management is sought to establish absolute control over a worker's body and their work for maximum productivity. There are many other examples throughout history that demonstrate how surveillance and policing of workers strips them of their autonomy and dignity and is used to control them in multiple ways. These modes of management and control over workers to maximize productivity and profit through extreme exploitation has laid the groundwork for the way big corporations like Amazon work today. And of course, that's only grossly exacerbated by big tech, and Amazon is a prime example of this. I think it's important to note that it's important to know the history of this, but also to note how workers have resisted against this over the years. For example, in response to the rise of Taylorism and scientific management, labor organizations spoke out and rejected scientific management, saying their autonomy was being taken away and that the practice turned workers into machines, which you can hear echoed today all across Amazon. Amazon workers say that all the time. And so workplace surveillance has a long-standing history in this country, and at the core of it is brutal exploitation and complete control of the workers. We need to understand where these labor practices originate from, who it affects, and how workers have fought back against it throughout history in order for us to take on corporations like Amazon, where surveillance is central to their business model and market dominance. In relation to Amazon, workers have been speaking out against workplace surveillance, like Great TOT, as Allegra mentioned, for years. In 2019, workers in Sacramento protested, along with workers in Minneapolis who stated things like, "We have no value here. They treat us like we are not human." So a lot of parallels, and it's important to really ground us in our history so we can know how to fight back against corporations like Amazon today.
Okay, and thank you, Mona. And I think, we've kind of been talking a lot about the history, and Allegra gave us a little context of what it means to actually work at one of these facilities. But I think, for people to really understand, get a clear understanding of what does it mean to be monitored to this depth? What are the implications? And so, Shreya, do you think you can kind of walk us through, this surveillance system, the Racializing system has been described as being really punishing and really hard on people physically and creating a dangerous pace of work. Can you speak more about that health and safety issues?
So, yeah, the the surveillance there, it starts like way at the beginning of the day. You go in and you are being surveillanced by cameras from the minute you pull into the parking lot till the moment you leave the parking lot when your day is over. Our scanners report to our managers where we're at, what we're doing, pretty much at all times. And this causes like a lot of issues with people. Those that can't make rate are very stressed out. They tend to be upset most of the day. Worried they're not going to meet rate. They're worried that they're going to have write up, or they're going to be terminated eventually because their rates aren't high enough, or maybe their TOT is too high. So even people that are actually making rate and don't have any TOT, they're stressed out, and it's because they're also concerned, what if I can't make rate today? What if today's the day I don't meet that quota? And so we see like a lot of mental health issues with depression and anxiety and things like that with Amazon employees. And then there's also the issue of physical injuries that are happening because people are working really fast, trying to keep that rate where it needs to be or above, just to make sure that they're not going to hit that point of being written up or terminated. So when you're working really fast, like the Amazon workers tend to do, there's not time to stop and worry about whether or not you have lifted something properly. There's not time to stop and worry about whether or not an item has been put back in the bin in a safe manner. So like at my FC, we would see boxes falling from bins all the time. And I had like really big boxes come falling down on me from like 45 feet in the air. And these weren't small boxes. They were like headboard size, the size of a bed headboard, probably like a full or larger. And these were just some really big boxes, and they just came from way up, and like 5 of them collapsed on me because they weren't put on the shelves properly because people are in a hurry, and it's not the person's fault that loaded them. It's just the way it works at Amazon. People are rushed, people are in a hurry, people don't want to get in trouble, people are skipping safety practices all day long because they just need to get that rate and that TOT where it's expected to be for the company. So there are a lot of things that happen at Amazon, and I think like for the majority of the time, it can all be traced back to rate and TOT in some form.
Yeah, thank you, Straya. And Allegra, like with your experience there, it was reported earlier this year that, Amazon has doubled the injury rate for, any company in the same sector as far as warehouse. And, in 2019, they churned through over 500,000 workers. And so, like, what are you seeing, like, with people, and the kind of injuries people sustain just on a, like, day-to-day basis?
Bad, like, and it's all people are getting seriously hurt. I'm talking heavy, like metal carts slamming into you. People are, rushing, moving so fast in the aisles, and they're not doing it. They're doing it because they're really applying pressure to them, threatening, to terminate them and other stuff. And yeah, and like even like I've tried pointing it out to managers and stuff. Like me and my sister even had conversations about it. And like I don't think they get it. Like applying the pressure isn't gonna solve whatever problem if they're not meeting the standard that they feel they should be meeting and stuff, or how people should be performing. Like you actually have to take the time and you have to go, communicate with your workers. Stop treating them like they're robots. Like, oh well, if you do this, like as if they're just broken, and if you do this, it's gonna fix the problem, and it's not that simple. You have to go. You have to go. You have to talk to them, find out what kind of barriers they're facing, and see what the actual problem is, and try and fix it and help them fix it. That's your job. But they just want to take shortcuts and not do any of that. And to them, they're like, okay, well, this person don't perform, then okay, we're gonna try and pressure them into performing well, and it doesn't work like that. Not a lot of people perform well under pressure. And yeah, then they're like, okay, well, if that don't work, then we'll just fire them at some point and bring in new people. You're not fixing the problem.
Yeah, thank you, Allegra. And to the point that you just made, I mean, Amazon, when we say churn through, we really mean they are cycling through workers. I mean, one of the concerns that a lot of the folks in this space have is like Amazon, other corporations, mimicking or copying Amazon's practices so that they can compete at that level. And if we end up getting into this position where we have companies competing to exploit workers and control workers' bodies at this level, we're going to be getting, churning through workforces, entire communities throughout the country. And we're already seeing the kind of early signs of that with just Amazon themselves and how quickly they're cycling through the workforce. And I think one of the things that would be interesting to hear, Estrella, just from your organizing, if you have any stories, but how does it work? How does this impact folks who may be pregnant or who may have a disability of some sorts? Sorry, Estrella, you're muted.
So thank you. So yeah, it's very stressful for people who are injured or pregnant or need some sort of accommodations, because a lot of the time I'm hearing from people that I applied for accommodations and I can't get them, and so they're having me take time off, but I'm only making 60% of my pay rate, which in turn causes them to not be able to pay rent or pay, the bills, or be able to buy food for their family or what have you. And it's an ongoing process with them that I hear a lot of stories that is a thing. It's not just a couple people here and there that couldn't get accommodations. It's a lot of people. And the more people and the longer people work for Amazon, the more injuries are going to happen. I see new warehouses that are being built out here in Colorado, and it's a big deal. I worry about my fellow people here that are going to work for Amazon and then maybe ending up injured and unable to work for the rest of their lives because Amazon stepped in claiming they're going to create all of these great jobs. People apply for them and end up injured and in poverty for the remainder of their lives, which is absolutely unfair and scary. And so the implications of being disabled or being pregnant with Amazon, they don't really adjust your rate, so your rate's not going to go down if you're pregnant or injured. You still have to meet that rate, and if you can't, you end up being written up and fired. So that's kind of how they're managing that, which is a real shame. They really do have a I don't even know what to call it. I guess like a churn and burn thing where they just turn the people over and fire them as soon as they don't like what's being said. Like Allegra said, as soon as they don't like what's happening, they just fire somebody and they get in a new load of people. So it's a very real thing.
Thank you, Estrella. And it's like this goes beyond like a lot, people may be listening to this and thinking, well, you have to monitor workers to get their jobs done or have some kind of idea like that. But this is so far beyond that. Not only is the technology literally controlling the bodies and telling people what to do, you have, the AI cameras that are monitoring people, and you have, facial recognition and all these various technologies all coming together. And but the Amazon employs this technology and uses it to kind of surveil workers who are organizing, who are speaking out, and then the rate TOT system gives them a kind of a cover to retaliate. And so, Mona, can you speak to like how Amazon has used this rate TOT system and what's happening, as far as when it comes to suppressing worker organizing?
Yeah, so as you both have just spoken to, rate and TOT is not only this quota system, but it's used to watch your every single move to the point of knowing, how long it took you to go to the bathroom, or how long you strayed away from your scanner, and it'll alert that you're not, working and stuff like that. So they're not only are they watching, when they watch your every move, they're also using that to scan for any off the line like worker talk, right? And is used to monitor workers, disproportionately Black and brown workers who are trying to organize internally. And they used a lot of the same tactics when the Alabama union drive was happening. Used rate and TOT in the name of needing to watch these workers all the time, to keep tabs on who's talking to who's in favor of the union, things like that. So this constant surveillance is not only used to control workers' autonomy and body movements, but to know what they're talking about in the workplace as well.
Yeah, and that that couples along, and that's the thing we really want people to understand. These are like layers of surveillance. Rate TOT is like the foundation. There's a lot of components of that, but Amazon is adding on to it, like having the folks who are part of their intelligence team, trying to get into closed Facebook groups. So it goes outside of the workplace into these different spaces where people are monitoring workers on social media and in other ways to compile reports on specific workers and on specific facilities that are moving forward to organize. And Straya, can you talk a little bit more about that just in general and what the suppression is like for workers?
Yeah, so it's kind of like how Mona was talking about with the Panopticon issues, where they would have the tower in the middle of the cells, and people never knew if they were really being watched or not. It's pretty much the same feeling. You never know if those cameras that are trained on you are really watching you or if they're not. And if you're going to do something that's going to get you fired because you're being watched by those cameras. And it's not just the cameras that are surveilling you. As I was saying earlier, the scanner surveils you. It reports back to your boss. There's the company, the yes man for the company that's always working beside you, that will go and rat you out to the boss because they think it's going to get them somewhere. There are so many different eyes keeping an eye on what's going on, even the break rooms. And we had a little area out front of our building, the little smoking porch and patio where everybody would sit, and that was under surveillance. It's very stressful to know you're constantly being watched, to know that if you pop into a Facebook group, somebody may rat you out, or that there could be somebody from your FC that's in management that's just going to pull you aside and say something about what you posted. They're very good at using their powers of surveillance to threaten, punish, and intimidate with, and it's really horrible. It causes a lot of stress, it causes a lot of anxiety, it causes people to be afraid to speak out, to say anything bad against the company, because they're never sure if somebody's watching or if it's going to get reported back.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as Mona and Straya both discussed this kind of tower, imagery when it comes to describing Amazon surveillance. And I think that's like really important to kind of echo. One of the interesting things about Amazon is that they have their surveillance empire, like workplace surveillance is only a component of it, you know. They're not just trying to expand and innovate that kind of controlling technology. They're also doing it in the community. And so what we see is that Amazon is simultaneously on, like, you know, leading the way in surveilling workers, but also surveilling the public at large. So when you look at something like Amazon Ring cameras, which are essentially doorbell cameras and other cameras, they have dashboard cameras and mailbox cameras as well, that, you know, basically just 24/7 record footage. And, you know, it's separate than some of the other products on the market because Amazon has this partnership with police that allows them to, you know, and allows them to request footage through the neighbors app, sorry. And so we're seeing Amazon, you know, build these two components of a surveillance empire that's ultimately coming together. Now, people may say, okay, well, one of those issues is surveillance and policing, and one of those issues is workplace surveillance, and they're fundamentally different issues. And I think in the past, that's how it's, you know, been seen by and how we're trying to deal with it from a policy perspective, not necessarily an activism perspective. But when it comes to Amazon, there's nothing that's actually creating that separation. There's no regulations or oversight or anything that prevents how those two systems interact. And, you know, when we look at the surveillance and the camera, there's a camera in Amazon delivery vans that folks may see drive by that is recording not just the driver and like their face and retina, but also out the front window, both side windows, and then the rear view. So you can think of all the Amazon, you know, the thousands of Amazon vans that are driving through country and driving through our communities, and all of that footage you're recording. And Amazon's already said that they can't or, you know, won't commit to not ever sharing that with law enforcement or the government. And so we see this kind of blurriness happening, you know, between how footage is covered, how footage is captured, and then how the technology is used in the different spaces. And there's nothing to say that you can't develop technology in the worker surveillance network and then use it for the public at large for whatever their profit purposes are. And so I think, you know, Mona, could you speak a little bit more to this kind of surveillance empire that I'm describing and like the connections with race and capitalism?
Yeah. So it's really important to understand that there's this deep-seated connection between race, capitalism, and surveillance. As you said, Ailey, Amazon's expansive surveillance is just the latest iteration of a system designed to exploit and oppress Black and brown workers. Today's Amazon surveillance empire, as you said, aren't limited to the workplace and expand far beyond that. As you said, they hold over 2,000 contracts with police. They also play a central role in providing the backbone infrastructure for many of ICE, U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement, and then the DHS, Department of Homeland Security's key programs. And they also provide cloud services for Israel's apartheid military operations. So they play a crucial role in upholding this prison industrial complex, which of course serves capitalism, relies on profitable punishment, which is what rate and COT is, and then relies on exploitation, mass incarceration, and the systemic oppression of Black and brown communities. And of course, surveillance technology plays a key role in upholding all of that. Amazon is arming the police state with an extensive shop of powerful surveillance tools that are used to criminalize and surveil communities of color, not only domestically, but internationally as well. And as you said earlier, Ayeli, this is going to be the future of work. Other corporations are quickly trying to follow Amazon's model. And Amazon's systemic racism, capitalistic practices of monopoly power, and exploitation and extensive surveillance technology, both within their warehouses and across the world. Just they're not separate issues. They feed off of one another. They all need each other to thrive in a way that keeps Black and Brown communities oppressed, workers exploited, and the corporate elite in power.
Okay, and Allegra, I know, earlier in the year, I've heard you speak several times, and one of the times you were specifically speaking about, Amazon, not only policing Black and Brown workers in the workplace, but also in the community, and just like your feelings on Amazon Ring and facial recognition, and when you're, as like, an employee, as someone you're working at Amazon and dealing with the surveillance system in the workplace there, like, how does it feel for you to hear about also what's happening with them surveilling, communities?
Honestly, I'm not surprised. It doesn't shock me. It's not a shocker at all, especially to a lot of the communities. I'm pretty sure there's a good handful of them that are like low income, not necessarily low income, but like that, and then like where predominantly it's mostly people of color there. And so, like I said, none of it at this point, nothing they do is a surprise to me. I'm not surprised at all. Like
Yeah, and
Amazon,
thank
the
you.
way yeah.
I'm sorry, continue.
Oh no, I was gonna say like Amazon, like the way they operate, even just like with the delivery service, because there were times where what you call it, I ordered because at the time like I was so tired, so I tried ordering from, the service they have fresh to see how it is, just to see how it is. Like I had Amazon Prime and stuff. I canceled all that honestly because I don't want to use it anymore because I don't feel the need, give them their money back that I'm earning. That's in my opinion. But yeah, so I would order from it, Amazon Fresh, and then every time I got a driver, my driver, they would always like make it a thing to like, like talk down on me. Oh well, you're in this kind of neighborhood and stuff. Basically saying, oh, I don't go to these kinds of neighborhoods, so you're gonna have to hurry up and stuff. The drivers they have, they're really rude, and if you ask me, that's racial profiling because there's nothing but people of color in these neighborhoods for the most part that I'm in. And so you're telling me, you're willing to take this job knowing that it can send you to a lot of different places, like over here where I'm at. And then for you to stand there and talk down on me when you're delivering my orders and stuff and telling me how bad my neighborhood is or telling me, oh, I gotta hurry up or you're going to just leave my stuff out there because you don't want to be over here. And I'm like, okay. But like you signed up for this, like, and you shouldn't talk down on anybody. And like I've had like some delivery drivers where they're specifically telling me like, yeah, you guys over here, it's not safe being over here with all these people or all these kinds of people. And then I'm like, what do you mean all these kinds of people? Because there's bad people everywhere you go. So I'm confused.
Yeah. And then I would follow up and thank you, Allegra, with Shreya, and just ask, like, from your perspective as an organizer, do you like the importance of, like, what do you feel the importance of, these issue areas connecting as far as surveillance, policing, and, worker rights?
I feel like, don't get me wrong, it's a good idea. Because it's a good idea. But the people you're targeting, that's what it is. That makes it a bad idea. You can't target one specific group of people and act like they're the problem. When, crime has no race, no gender to it. Any gender could commit a crime. Anybody of any race commits a crime. Of all races commit crimes. There's people of all races in prison. So you can't stand around and act like, it's one particular group of people and treat those people unfairly because of it. Because whatever reason or whatever you feel, when That's not the case. You can't do that.
Thank you, Allegra and Shreya.
Yeah, I think you know, a lot of what Allegra said is right on the money, but I also think like it helps to combine all of these because I mean Amazon is a huge company, and the more of us that gather together and connect the dots, I think the better chance we have of changing things. If we workers and organizers all fight, and then we've got, you know, the environmentalists fighting on the other end. You know, those are two groups fighting two separate issues. Whereas if we all gather together and we all fight together, we're just a bigger group fighting a combined company. So, yeah, I think it's great, and I think it's very helpful for everybody to come together and join forces.
Thank you, Shreya. And yeah, and as we get into, you know, that pivots us really nicely into talking about like, what do we need to do to end this workplace surveillance? You know, we know that, you know, the workers have been organizing and for several years now, and I think that's been mentioned a couple of times in this talk. But Shreya, could you also, as an organizer, just speak a little bit to more of like what are workers doing to organize and specifically end productivity surveillance at Amazon, and then efforts that are happening on the maybe the policy level?
So with workers, we have a lot of work to do because so many of them, myself included, really don't put together the surveillance and how deep it really goes. So that's something that I learned, you know, just a couple weeks coming in as an organizer, and I was quite shocked that I hadn't put that together. And when I talked to a lot of other people, they also have not. So that's kind of something that we're working on, is teaching them like how deep it really goes and how far back like this issue really stretches. This is not a new issue that's just, you know, significant with Amazon. That this has been going on for many, many, many decades and even centuries. So that's quite a bit of work that we're doing with them, is trying to make them aware of that. When we're seeing like people in warehouses fighting TOT and rate, like we're doing a lot of petitions. We do a lot of storytelling so that people are able to get their stories out there and share with the public so that the public knows what's happening. And also with people like, you know, we've had some dealings with like Rashida Tlaib and Debbie Dingle out in Michigan, where they stepped in and backed DTW1 when they did their walkout, which we had actually helped them do last year on April 1st, because they weren't getting enough PPE, or like they just really didn't have a lot of safety issues in place for the coronavirus. So having Congress step in and help us and back us is really helpful. They just enacted the AB 701 law out in California, which does a lot of trying to stop the rate in TOT issue, so that people are able to use the bathroom and take their time and catch a breather and let their bodies rest. And I mean, it's just the beginning of a lot of work we still have to do, but it's something. And yeah, there's a lot to be done, and we're always working on a lot. And I think we ask a lot from our workers, but you know, at the end, that's who it's really going to help. So I think it's worth it for them to step up, no matter how afraid they are, or how intimidated they are by Amazon.
Okay, thank you, Shreya. And Allegra, I mean, you've been doing this work for a while now and sharing your story and your experience. What would you like to see other workers at Amazon, working at Amazon warehouses and facilities do to help move forward this issue so you guys can end rate TOT?
They need to speak up. That's it. Like they're like Amazon whole thing, what they do is, they threaten you with the whole TOT and they want to make you afraid so you don't talk, so you don't lose your job. But honestly, if she show them, that you're not afraid, you're gonna speak up for what's right, and if everybody stick together and stand together, then there's nothing honestly they could really do to you. They're not gonna fire everybody, and two, that's gonna make them look really bad. They can't do that. They can try to, but they can't, and they know they're gonna get caught and get in a lot of trouble. But yeah, that's like the main thing I tell. Like, you can't be afraid. Like, it's normal, especially speaking up against a big corporate, a company like Amazon, to be, scared or whatever. But like, once you get past that, like, you're gonna see like there's literally nothing for the most part they can do to you. Like, and they're gonna be like, oh, well, this person is speaking up, so let's let's start getting, doing what we're at least supposed to do. They're gonna try to, because they're like, okay, well, this person is putting us on blast now. Like that's what happened at our site when coronavirus first started. Like me and my sister, we started speaking out, putting them on blast. Like, why is all the hand sanitizer and like face masks and stuff like locked up, and we have a bare minimum amount for the day. Sometimes you have people walking around and they're asking for a mask and they can't get a mask because everything's locked away. Why is it like that? We should have enough out a day for us to have in use. We should have cleaning supplies out throughout the day so we can wipe down our scanners after every use, or at least before you start using it. And yeah, because now when you put them on blast, like, and they're like, oh, okay, this person, they're they're putting me out there. They don't want to look bad. That's their whole thing. Cause like Amazon, their whole thing too is overall like, they so-called care about their workers a lot, when in reality they don't. So they're gonna do anything to try and make themselves look good and look like they care. They want to make themselves appear to be, that company that's for their employees and everything, when, in reality, they're not. But it's all about speaking up and being able to say, no, this isn't right. Because when you start getting on top of them and applying that pressure, that's when you're going to start seeing changes. Because then you'll be like, okay, no, this person, it wasn't just a one time thing. This person is really calling us out. And they're gonna have no choice but to do their job.
Yeah, thank you, Allegra. And we're coming to the final minutes of this, so we're going to keep talking a little bit. But if anybody's watching live and wants to ask a question, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll jump to it in our remaining minutes. And until we see any questions, we're just going to continue with this conversation. And so I would just say, Mona, as we're going to end this, Mona, do you have any final thoughts on just the overall need to end workplace surveillance and these racist practices that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think it's important to really see these connections between surveillance and worker organizing, especially in Amazon. Like, we cannot do any real successful worker organizing without addressing the threat of surveillance and workplace surveillance. And if that isn't on our radar, then we won't win. I think labor organizing now is definitely not what it was a few years ago. It's just not the same, and we're not going to get what workers need and deserve if we kind of turn our backs towards this surveillance threat. So I think it's really, really important to not only see that those connections are in the workplace, but outside the workplace in our communities as well, because that's also integral to worker organizing, is connecting community issues to workplace issues. So this is opens a lot of doors for anti-surveillance organizers and the movement as a whole to connect with labor movement as a whole, to really put our heads together and realize that it's all the same fight.
And Shreya, your final thoughts?
You know, I have a lot to say about what goes on at Amazon, and so I guess picking and choosing, just in closing, I think it's just best to say that, you know, until we get Amazon under control, we're just going to continue having issues, you know, community wide, because other companies do follow their example, and we need to change that before we have an entire workforce that's built on policies that revolve around intimidating, scaring, and you know, abusing its workforce. So it's time to put an end to that before it can get worse. So I guess that's what I got.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya. And then Allegra, do you want to offer final thoughts as we're closing this up?
Yeah, I pretty much said what I pretty much said. I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. And I just like to say real quick, I know, you know, Allegra made this point earlier about the strength in numbers. And so, you know, it would be really, you know, and how everyone coming together as far as the workers would definitely strengthen this fight. But, you know, real quick, just since we have a couple minutes, Mona, how do you, like, what is your feelings on strengthening the fight against workplace surveillance with, you know, solidarity between, say, like, folks who are working to defund the police and demilitarize the police and working to end surveillance and policing, and, you know, their role in particularly joining this fight to end workplace surveillance?
But I think that just goes back to realize, like, to understanding Amazon's role in all of that, in the policing sphere and the workplace sphere. Like their surveillance technology and practices are not limited to just the workplace or policing communities as well. So it's just important to realize that Amazon has its hand in all of this, and it's not really an inseparable issue. And understanding that its contracts with police is just as harmful as rape and TOT is really important and powerful to understand.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, Amazon is a new breed, a kind of 21st century corporation, and it's really going to take all of us in intersecting issues of racial justice and gender justice and disability rights and worker rights and, you know, militarization, all of us coming together from these various issue areas and understand, and, you know, and putting our understanding together and our resources to take on this fight. And I think, you know, in fighting a lot of what's happening with Amazon, we also create the precedent and opportunities for policies that help all people who are working at all the other corporations that are doing things as egregious as like what's happening at Amazon. So I thank you, Shreya and Mona and Allegra, for joining this conversation and making time in your day. Especially Allegra, I know that you're working at Amazon and have long shifts, and I really appreciate you taking time to jump on this call. And, you know, thank you for Netroots for providing a platform for this conversation. So thank you all.